welcome everybody. Today we're commemorating 5 years of the Women in Economics Network. When I told a colleague that what I was doing today, their response was, wow, it's only been 5 years. And I think that really reflects the amount of work that's been done over the last 5 years and the progress that the Women in Economics Network's managed to make for women in the profession across, different areas of the profession. We are representing women in academia, we're representing students, teachers, women in the public sector and women in industry. And the number of events that have been held over that time in different state and territories has been phenomenal. The profile that we've seen in terms of women in economics in the media has been, again, a huge gains that have been made over the last 5 years. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional lands where we're all meeting on today across Australia and the traditional owners and their connection to land and sea, paying my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Today we have a really special lineup for you of some really great stories about what WEN has achieved over the last 5 years. We're going to start right at the beginning. These things don't just come from anywhere. They come from women who have put in a lot of time and effort, but also have put themselves on the line in essence. And that's why we're starting with Professor Cobb-Clark, who was instrumental in the establishment of WEN when she was on the ESA Central Committee and establishing the first retreat, which really then led to the establishment of WEN. And Deborah is going to run through what was critical about that success, about what she had to go through to get it up, and what support she had in doing that. Deborah, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Angela. Hello, everyone. So I've been asked to sort of reflect on the beginnings of WEN. I didn't really set out to establish WEN. It wasn't what I was thinking about. And in fact, my contribution to this is really around that first academic retreat. I didn't know that that was going to lead to WEN at the time. So I was engaged in writing a ARC application for a Laureate Fellowship, and there's a special additional funding you can request if you're a woman and you apply for a Laureate Fellowship to provide leadership in your academic discipline. And the fellowship's named after Kathleen Fitzpatrick. It's called the Fitzpatrick Fellowship. And I had done some reading just to sort of understand who this woman was. And although she was a successful academic, she had always felt that she would have been more successful if she'd had additional mentoring. So that gave me the idea to think about writing a 2-page thing that would sort of say, hey, if you give me this fellowship and you give me the $10,000 that goes with it, what I will do is I will establish some sort of mentoring for women economists. And I had talked to Karen Munford, who was involved in an initiative in the UK, and I had spoken to Shelley Lundberg, who was part of SUISA in the US. So it was clear that, $10,000 was a great start, but it wasn't really going to be enough. So at that point, I went to Matt Gutland and said, if I get this fellowship, would the Economics Society consider co-sponsoring this? And he was very enthusiastic. He was quite enthusiastic. Matt at the time was the president of the Economics Society. He was also the chair of my advisory board at the Melbourne Institute. And he'd been very supportive of me. And it was kind of natural that I would reach out to him. He was quite happy. So the application went in, and about a month later, Matt called me up and said, we need to get going on this retreat for these women. And I said, oh, no, Matt, you misunderstood. Remember, I said that I was going to put this as part of this fellowship application. And if the ARC chooses to fund this fellowship, then we'll go ahead with the retreat. And Matt at that point said to me, no, we need to do it anyway because it's really important. And I kind of went, I don't really need one more thing to do. And the timeline was very short, I remember. But I felt that I really owed Matt, and it really was a good idea. And so the Economics Society funded this from the beginning. I never got that fellowship, so we never got the seed funding from the ARC. We put it together very quickly for academic women. The first retreat was designed for them, largely because that's what I knew. And I had friends that I could sort of round up very quickly. I was on the council at the time, and there were some discussions about the fact, how many of these women who participate in this retreat will actually be members of the Economic Society. And I sort of say, oh, don't worry about any of that. This is your opportunity to take a leadership stance for the profession as a whole. And they were persuaded by that. So we had a lovely retreat attached to the Adelaide ACE conference. We'd rounded up some international women who were already in the country because we didn't have that big a budget. Lovely winery. At the end of this retreat, I said two things to the women that were sitting there. One, remember that you've been supported by the Economic Society here. And perhaps if you're not a member, you ought to consider whether your opportunity for changing the profession would come as part of your membership in the Economic Society. The second thing I said was, we are providing you with the names and email addresses of everyone who's attended. So it's up to you now to do something with the connections that you've made. And I packed my bags and went home. And I heard nothing about WEN until there was a well-formed proposal to establish it in every single state as part of the Economic Society. And I find that a very powerful story because it really gives you a sense of what people can do from the grassroots when they're motivated. So I think I'll leave it there because I know we're going to hear more about the establishment of the committee later
on. Thank you, Deborah. And I agree. I think it's an incredibly powerful story about how, the right people at the right time can lead to something of such high value. So thank you for sharing. Next up, as the National Deputy Chair of WEN, I have the great pleasure to introduce the National Chair of the Women in Economics Network, Dr Leonora Risse, who is known obviously to everybody probably here today. She is a lecturer at RMIT and has published extensively on gender issues. And today what she's going to do is present a paper which I really encourage you to read, which looks at lifting diversity and inclusion in economics profession in Australia. And it was presented to the US Federal Reserve Board Conference last year. It's a joint paper between Leonora, Danielle Wood, Rebecca Castles, and Douga Yengan, who's also on our panel today. So I will pass over to Leonora, who will run through the findings and I think really encapsulate what WEN has achieved over the last 5 years.
Thank you very much, Angela. So hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for being part of this event. And this is a collective event. This is encapsulating the effort, the dedication that's been put towards the creation and the growth of WEN by so many people. You've heard from Deborah about the story of WEN and its beginnings, and what I'm sharing with you here is the way that we have documented this in the form of a paper. We thought we need to put this down in writing, and as economists, we also want to add an economic lens to this and share with you the research that guided WEN, the statistics, the statistical picture, and measuring WEN's impact and output in the ways that economists like to conduct things. So that's what I'm sharing with you. And then following that, you're going to hear some of the more personal stories from the other members of our panel. And we invite everyone also in the audience to share your personal reflections along the way. So this paper, I'm sharing with you some slides, but you can find a copy of the paper on the WEN website as well. I'd like to acknowledge I'm joining you today from Bungalang country and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Ugamba people. As Angela has said, this paper is a joint collaboration with so much input, but co-authored by myself along with Rebecca Castles, Danielle Wood and Dougu Yengin. So what I'm going to talk through today is the statistics. We know we like some numbers to lay some foundations. I'll share with you some formalities of how WEN was created. You're going to hear more about that from Danielle as well. I'm going to share with you some of the gender equality research and what we know about what matters for making an impact, what works and what doesn't, and how WEN paid attention to that, WEN's impact, and also thinking ahead about challenges and opportunities for the future. So we like to see what is the statistical picture, and we've relied on some census data here to paint a picture of what was the status of the economics profession in Australia before WEN was created, and what was the gender composition. So you can see here, this is a measurement of people who self-identify as economists in the census. We're talking about around 1/3 of them being female. And then if we also look at people who hold an economics qualification in Australia, we're talking about 40% who are female. The picture in schools is a little worrying, and the Reserve Bank of Australia has done some excellent research to investigate this and look at the implications for the future diversity of our profession. The statistics or the data we were able to source for some states goes back to the early 1990s. So this is for Year 12's economic enrolments in New South Wales and Queensland. And what you'll notice is that during the 90s, you know, when we had quite a turbulent economic environment in Australia, women's representation in the classroom, female students, were actually pretty strong, and in fact near parity. I myself was one of the Queensland students sitting in the classroom around about here. So it goes to show that actually what we have seen is a deterioration over time, that there was once a time when women were in equal numbers with their male counterparts. This is data for Victoria and South Australia for completions, and you can see in more recent times we're now looking at women falling into the minority. What's happening in our university lecture theatres, this data comes courtesy of the Grattan Institute. You can see women are in the minority there as well, with quite a degree of volatility over time. What's happening in terms of our university academics? We know that the people who teach economics have the capacity to really influence our decisions, whether or not we continue with the subject or we steer off into another direction. So this data comes courtesy of a survey that was conducted by the ESA with Deborah's leadership in that respect. And you can see by the time we're looking at senior ranks, this was for 2016, women were in a stark minority. WEN is currently conducting an audit of university economics departments. So we're measuring and watching you at the moment, and we'll be reporting on that data as soon as it becomes available. Often people ask, how does economics compare to other fields, other disciplines? And one comparison is STEM. And this information for 2019 for academic staff in the STEM fields suggests that we're looking at sort of a similar comparison in terms of women representing around about 1/3, and at academic ranks, you know, less than 20% at the top academic ranks. Deborah has shared the story of how really those senior women were looking out for us. They were looking out for junior and mid-career women coming through the profession, and they were mindful. They knew that women were a minority. They knew the existence of biases and barriers to women's career progression. And they were looking out for us when they brought us together in that mentoring retreat and said to us, you know, we've brought you together and here's an opportunity for you to collectively do something about this, to mobilise and to work as a team to really create better opportunities for yourself and for the profession and for the next generation of women coming through the pipeline. And so we used what resources we had in a volunteer capacity to put together a proposal. And this is the way that we described the goals and the mission of WEN. We were mindful about the women who are currently in the profession. How do we connect and support them? And one word I would use there is, how do we build a community? How do we build a sense of reassurance for women in the profession that you belong? You are not an outsider. There are other women just like you. There are people and resources here to support you and give you equal voice, equal opportunity, and equal recognition. This was about thinking about women's representation in the profession at all levels. As you saw, it's similar to many other fields where women are underrepresented in leadership and decision making, which matters, obviously. This third one here is about public contributions, and this is really about visibility and voice and recognition. And then the pipeline, thinking about women coming through, what is discouraging young women or young people in general from choosing economics? Is there something that's putting them off? And does gender and perceptions of it being a male-dominated field have anything to do with that? We acknowledge we formed with the support of the Economic Society of Australia. That was really part of WEN's success, was the support that we received from the ESA. And we were also mindful about WEN being inclusive. So not just about academia, but about economists in the public sector, in the private sector, in the education space, and in the wider community, people who care about gender equality more generally. And in conversations with some similar organisations like in the US and the UK and Canada, elsewhere around the world, they pointed out to us that they recognise this as one of WEN's strengths, that we do have that multi-sectoral approach. And that's something we're very keen to continue to foster. In terms of the hands-on initiatives, now if you've been part of WEN, you've participated in WEN, you'd have a fair idea about these are some of the activities and the initiatives that we have created, which generally try to align to those broad missions and goals. Mentoring retreat is a big part of our program, and that's not just about providing professional support, but also about creating that community, bringing people together, bringing women together. And that accompanies other professional development opportunities for women. We've created outlets for publication. I would like to give a shout out to the Credible Economist blog, which provides a vehicle for women's voices and values to be heard. And our events and our networking is really about that community building. And we also appreciate the support and the involvement and participation of men in the profession as well, because this isn't designed to segregate. This is designed for men to also value and take an interest in women's contributions as well, and for the next generation of young men to also see that, you know, women's representation in economics is something for it to be normalised and not to be out of the ordinary. We're mindful that we can't just put all the onus on women to try to fix themselves or try to change. It's also about how do we change culture and policies and the institutional architecture. And the literature on gender equality really speaks to the importance of that cultural change. And one of the vehicles that we've used to foster, to collaborate and disseminate that type of research is through the establishment of the Australian Gender Economics Workshop. So that's an annual event now, which is a high quality research conference in its own right, but also serves as a vehicle for highlighting the evidence of what works and what doesn't to promote gender equality. One personal note I'd like to make here is that when we talk about women's career progression, often in our workplaces, women are told you need to bide your time, you need to, wait a couple of years until you've got leadership capability. And we know that there are gender biases within that. And what's been wonderful about WEN is that the community that we've built and the committee members at state and national level, we see value and capability and potential in our members. And WEN provides them with an opportunity to prove their capability, to prove their leadership credentials, to prove their innovative and creative and management organisational capabilities. Rather than waiting for their employer to hand them a formal role, we say, look, here it is, here's an opportunity and you can prove it. And I think that's been perhaps an implicit, and we didn't realise we were doing that until these initiatives have unfolded, and it's been a case of women demonstrating leadership ability where others potentially doubted them. In terms of public contributions, the creation of the media register and public speaking register has been an important part of that, where we quite often have inquiries from journalists and conference organisers, and we've got our directory of economists there, female economists, who we can then give those names to journalists. So there's no excuse to say we can't find a female economist or a female expert on that topic. It shuts down that excuse. We've been more conscious about raising making sure women are on the shortlist for ESA awards and are among the keynotes for the Australian Conference of Economists. And if you track women's representation over time, you'll see that indeed those what are merit-based decisions are now increasing in terms of women's representation and voice amongst those acknowledgements and opportunities. The most recent one for the ESA awards being Stephanie Schurer, who was awarded Young Economist of the Year. We've been given, with the partnership of the National Press Club, a wonderful opportunity for women's voices to be part of the federal budget discussion. And in terms of inspiring our next generation and students, we've invested in the resources. So a lot of the time people say, oh, we need to rebrand economics and make it more inviting and appealing and exciting to students. Well, we have resources for you. An important one is a video, and Duygu is going to talk more about that later. So we have the resources there. They talk about opportunities, and they bring a more balanced gender picture of economics as well. Now, these initiatives are informed by the research, and I don't have time to go through all of this now, but I would encourage you, if you're interested, to take a look at the paper where we reference the relevant research. There are some broad themes underlying these initiatives. We knew we needed to improve perceptions about economics, and there's a misconception that economics is about money and profit and stock markets, and we know as practicing economists that that's not the case. And so you'll see in our materials, we highlight the role of well-being. We bring the human story back into our messaging about economics. And you'll also see from the research that the next generation are motivated to do something about real-world problems and challenges, climate change, poverty, inequality. And so you'll see that that's infused in our messaging as well, and emphasising how economics can be applied to make a practical difference in the world. We knew we needed to do something about improving perceptions about economists and what does an economist look like. You only have to Google economist and you'll get an idea about how it is a gender biased picture that is in the minds of people and the stereotypes that exist. So WEN's initiatives are about providing those role models and the visibility of female economists. It's really important to note that this isn't just about providing role models for females. This is also about the next generation of men and men who are currently in the profession getting accustomed to seeing female economists too. So it's about that broader cultural change. Understanding determinants for females' study and career choices. The Reserve Bank of Australia, Jackie Dwyer and her team with Tanya Livermore and Mike Major, they've invested in some excellent deep dive surveys of students to elicit what are the factors that are shaping students' decisions. And what's really heartening is that you'll see amongst the female students who opt for economics, what motivates them is how to solve problems. So I mean, what more do you want? People who are motivated to solve the world problems. a really powerful research insight comes from this study here by Pugac and Schroeder, and they experimented with messaging for economic students. This was US-based. And they investigated whether selling the fact that economists can earn a lot of money would actually do anything to incentivize more students. And they found it actually had the opposite effect with female students. It deterred them. And that tells us that that could risk actually just amplifying the misperception that economics is all about money. So we've taken note of that, and you'll notice that in our messaging, we don't talk about how much you can earn. We talk about economics making a valuable contribution, but led by the research and often challenging preconceived notions about what does work and what doesn't work. We've taken heed of those recent research findings. And then in terms of addressing gender inequities in a broader male-dominated field, this research is really pointing towards the existence of unconscious bias and barriers. We bring that into our initiatives, our event discussions, and making sure that our messaging is about women aren't broken or women aren't deficient. It's about the culture and the environment and the policies that we find ourselves in that can shape these outcomes. And the other key thing that you'll notice within WEN's activities and the feedback we've been receiving from members is that they notice a difference in the topics that WEN activities focus on and that women economists are researching and highlighting. And that speaks to the importance of having that gender diversity amongst your economics profession and the benefits that can bring. It broadens the scope of issues that are under analysis. It broadens people's perspectives. It alerts us to blind spots in economic policy making. And that sort of falls under the domain of a movement towards bringing gender lensing into our economic policy making more generally. Some measurements of WEN's impact. So one straightforward measurement here is ESA membership and what percentage do women constitute out of ESA membership. Preceding WEN, we were talking around about 20, a little bit over 20% since WEN was established in March 2017. You can see that we're now in the 40s. So as a percentage, roughly a doubling. We'd also be mindful that we know there were lots of other initiatives like the Reserve Bank initiative happening at the same time to try to encourage more women into the economics profession. So I guess WEN was part of that overall shift. We conducted a survey of our WEN members and the broader economics community last year and asked for some questions about people's perceptions of WEN's impact. And this slide here summarises some of those broad evaluations. The top one here summarises a positive perception that WEN has made a positive contribution to the economics profession in Australia. 43% survey participants strongly agree, 39% moderately agree. You can see these questions also ask about the extent to which WEN has improved the representation, recognition of women, awareness about gender equality, broadened the range of topics, created a greater sense of belonging and feeling connected to the profession. Sometimes that's difficult to put in numbers, but that's a key part of WEN's sense of community as well. If you would like to dive into this a little more, you can find it all in the paper. One really visible way that you'll notice that WEN's impact has been felt is the faces and voices that you hear in the media. The ABC, as a broadcasting organisation, recently embarked on something called the 50-50 Equality Project, where they were looking for a 50-50 representation in the people they were interviewing and the experts they were seeking. And WEN has been delighted to support that and to partner with the ABC on various projects. What I love is some of the quotes here where our WEN members, and thank you for those of you who left these quotes, have pointed out that they've noticed a difference. I love this quote here where this member has said that she didn't really pay much attention to economics before enrolling in her course more recently, and then started noticing Economist on the TV, and just because it was so recent, she just assumed that most, obviously seeing female economists on the ABC work, because I just figured most economists were women. So she's just notice how many female faces there are in the news and assume, oh, it must be a female concentrated field. So if that's not a measure of progress, I don't know what is. And I'd like to also share this quote that we received from one of our survey participants, who I think has summed up WEN's mission and impact in a very insightful and perceptive way. They've noticed how WEN has broadened economics. So we're not just talking about benefits for women individually, we're talking about benefits for the economics profession and community as a whole. They've noticed the importance of young women having role models, and that's obviously been a key part of WEN's work as well. And then this third paragraph here is really insightful. They say it is just as important for young men to look up and see both genders represented, and for them to broaden their thinking around economics and to think about women's issues as actually being human issues. I think that's really insightful. It's probably not something WEN really set out deliberately to achieve, but it is about that cultural change and breaking down gender stereotypes and gender segregation more generally. And so this is about the men realizing that, you know, their female colleagues have value to bring to the profession. We can look back and think about the ingredients that really made for WEN's success. Being multi-sectoral, having that grassroots approach has been part of WEN's effectiveness. We know as economists that there's much more we could do in terms of formally and robustly evaluating WEN's initiatives and interventions. We're mindful that we're all operating in a volunteer capacity. We're very grateful for the support of from our sponsors and partner organisations, but we do all operate in a volunteer capacity. So if there's a resource constraint there, but that's something for us to navigate in the future. We're mindful that there's a need to expand diversity within WEN across multiple demographic characteristics, which is really important for the essence of the principle of equality and diversity and belonging. We know that whenever we're making social change and pushing for social justice and change in the equality space, there is resistance, and that's been part of WEN's experience, and we understand that, and that's for us to navigate along the way. We're mindful that WEN isn't the first attempt to support women in the economics profession in Australia, that if you look back over previous decades, there have been several attempts, and we want to acknowledge the women who were in the start minority in the early days of their careers and in their education. It was a really, really difficult battle. They didn't have numbers, they didn't have the critical mass or the scale of support that WEN has been fortunate enough to receive. So we want to be mindful that we're standing on the shoulders of those women who've gone before us, and we can't be complacent about continuing our success in the future. We need that concerted effort and dedication. If you'd like to find out more information, there are all our links. In particular, if you'd like to see the paper, we've got a copy on the Research Hub page on our WEN website, and those student resources are freely available. You just need to go to the WEN website, go to the study menu, and you'll find the video, the link to the video, which is great to play for your students. And you'll find the other resources there, the online books, booklets and profiles of economists to share with your students and with your colleagues more generally. Finally, this is WEN it is possible only because so many people have contributed their efforts, their enthusiasm, and their dedication. I'm being a bit geeky now, and I'm thinking about, well, what would WEN's production function look like, the 3 Ps? And if I could sum it up, I would say purpose, having a very clear values-driven purpose. Passion, so it comes from a belief in what we're doing. And the people. It's the people, all the members of WEN and the committees and the support who have made it happen, who have brought WEN to life. And I'd like to just take a moment to acknowledge some of the key people who played a role. You heard from Deborah being instrumental at the very beginning, and partnering with the support of the ESA led by Dr. Matt Butland at the time, and bringing on board our senior mentors. Our Australian-based senior mentors were Professors Alison Booth, Lisa Cameron and Renee Fry-McKibben, who took a leap of faith in us and brought us together and really ushered the beginnings of WEN. Danielle's going to share with you the story of how the original committee was formed, and I'd like to acknowledge all the people who played a really important role there. Alongside Danielle, Duygu Yengin, Bethany Cooper from South Australia, Tina Rampino in Queensland, Rebecca Cassells in ACT, which is where the initial launch was held at Parliament House, Mala Raghavan in Tasmania, Pip Freebarn in New South Wales, and Annalena Gilhome in Western Australia. And a shout out to all our Western Australian members who I know are hopefully listening in on the other side of the country. From there, we've had amazing input and service from our chairs of our state and territory branches. Alongside all of these people are their teams. So this is a way of acknowledging not just the chairs, but also all the teams, the committee members who are behind the chairs. In ACT, we have Sherelle Murphy and Linda Ward. In New South Wales, Nikki Hutley, Alexandra Loeb and Carme Tang. In Western Australia, Sally McMahon and Cassandra Windsor. A huge shout out to Manika Jayasinghe in Northern Territory. We don't currently have an ESA branch, and yet Manika has been able to bring together a small community in Northern Territory to create the WEN branch, which is a huge achievement, and our full support is behind that. In Queensland, Christine Williams and Louisa Coughlin. In Victoria, Janine Bielecki and Lucy Percival and Jess Young. In South Australia, Elizabeth Alvaro and Tanya Day. In Tasmania, Maria Yanotti, and contributing at a national executive level, Angela Jackson, Carmela Shivers and Catherine Wagner. I'd like to quickly also acknowledge some really important people who took it upon themselves to implement some of WEN's key initiatives. It's Leith Thompson, who was the creative force behind the student video. Our gender economics workshop has been led by Astrid Mabisa-Kalyan and also with the support of Kristen Sobek this year. Our mentoring retreat has been led by Katie Bradbear and Natalie Baker, and Isabel Layton, Rhiannon Yetsenga and Evie Fox-Coob have taken it upon themselves to initiate some fantastic activities for WEN, the career profile of economists and the Credible Economist blog. And in the background of all of this is our amazing admin crew, and in particular, Diane Litherland. We couldn't do it without you, Diane. And so then all the people, all the committees, all the members of the state and territory committees, all the senior mentors, all the people who have offered their time to come and speak to WEN as guests, all of you have contributed towards bringing WEN to life, and it's because of the people that that's created a community. And we've used the analogy sometimes that WEN is like we've sowed a seed and now it's blossoming, it's flourishing, and so we thank each and every one of you for your contribution towards that.
Thank you, Leonora.
Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you so much, Leonora. What a fantastic presentation and what a fantastic piece of work that the four of you did. And I just thank you for documenting it in that way. And, you know, there'll be women, I think, around the world, and we know that there is interest globally in what WEN has been able to achieve from other similar organisations overseas and people looking to establish similar organisations overseas. So it's great to know that while in Australia it's been fantastic, but actually it's having now a global influence. I just encourage everybody, there is a Q&A open, and we will be going to that Q&A when we have a panel discussion in about 20 minutes time, once we hear from some of those panel members who are just going to introduce to you or run through some of the really key WEN initiatives, or maybe they're not the key ones, but just some really good examples of what WEN's been able to achieve over the last 5 years. We're starting with Tina Rampino, who is a lecturer at the University of Queensland and was the inaugural chair, I think, of the Queensland WEN chapter. So Tina, thank you very much. Who's going to talk to us about the retreats and the role that the retreats have had.
Hi, everyone. Very nice to see some of you and to be in the same space, even though it's just virtual. So the retreat was how the whole WEN initiative started. We were exposed to these two fantastic days where we were mentored closely by a professor in economics at that time. And at the end of the retreat, Deborah left the message that she said before, now it's down to you to do something about this. So what we just did was send an email around, gather interest, and that's how we started the committees in each state. The retreats are great because they provide this very kind of one-to-one mentoring experience, and they give you the opportunity to interact with your peers over these 2 intense days. And since this mentoring component of the retreat turned out to be very important for many of the things that then generated, we saw that most states decided to establish mentoring programs that have different features depending on each state. So one message that I can give around the retreat is that if you don't get the chance to participate in one, it's because there is such a pool of very good candidates that when we need to make a choice on who gets a spot on the retreat, it's very hard for us to choose. And we need to keep in mind that we want to give a chance to as many people as possible to be part of this initiative, that we need to make choices that guarantee that not everyone from the same institution gets a spot, but it's kind of distributed around different institutions and different characteristics. So if you don't get a spot one year, keep on trying. It has nothing to do with you. It's a matter of luck at a certain point also, because all candidates deserve a spot. But if you cannot take part in the retreat, which is this very intensive mentoring experience, be aware that there are mentoring initiatives across different states. I can speak for the mentoring program that we have in Queensland more closely because I was one of the people that started it. I can tell you that what we do is gather expression of interest from a pool of mentors across the different sectors, because WEN is not just about the academic sector, as Deborah has highlighted before. And once we gathered interest from mentors across the different sectors, and we welcome both female and male mentors, then we gather the expression of interest from the mentees, and we try to match them. And the one thing that we ask mentees is to have a specific career goal that they want to progress throughout the year. So they get to receive mentorship for the course of 1 year, and they need to work on a specific objective. And this idea of the specific objective came to mind to us after being part of a presentation by Catherine Fox, saying that mentoring is not enough to progress women's career. The right thing to do would be sponsorship. Well, sponsorship is not always possible, so we decided that a sweet in-between spot for making this happen was to work against a specific goal. So we took on board that idea, and so far it has worked. There have been many of the people that participated in a program that achieved their career goal, and they're very thankful to their mentors, and they kept in touch after the 12-month period. There's also mentoring initiatives in South Australia that are essentially targeted as students, and the mentors in that case are women, because they want to make sure there is a role model for these young economics students, female students, to follow and to persist in their studies and eventually their career in economics. Similarly, there were mentoring initiatives in ACT. And WA also has a program that includes both students and professionals. So as you can see, if you can't have the retreat experience, you can still find ways to be mentored by our more senior members of the network.
Thank you so much, Tina, for those reflections. And I am sure there is a lot of women online today who have benefited from the retreat. And I encourage women, who are here today who haven't been in the retreat, or maybe you're not a member. So I'm also going to encourage membership. I'll do this at the end as well, to join up and to renew to the ESA. But it gives you the opportunity to attend this retreat, which I think, the feedback that we get is that it's incredibly helpful for those women that attend. Next up, we have Duygu Yengin, who's Associate Professor at the University of Adelaide, and will talk to us about the WEN initiative of the student video, which I think if you haven't seen, please watch it. And I think there will be a link put into the Q&A. It is incredibly inspiring, and I have to say, really reinvigorates me when I'm having those low days in terms of why did I choose economics again if I'm having my STATA do files crashing or whatever else. It's incredibly inspiring. So Duygu, over to you.
Thank you, Angela. Hi everyone. So I'm joining today from Adelaide, Ghana land, traditional owners of the land. And this video that we created is so exciting to be part of that, especially as a person who is an introvert. It was so interesting for me to be on a video which is on YouTube and everyone can see you, and all, all my accent or whatever things I am not very happy with is all for the world to see, but it's for a good purpose. So I was very happy to be part of it. And Leonora already mentioned the research, that led to the formation of the video, but I want to discuss it a bit more. But to give you a brief description of the video, it's a 7-minute video, although we took perhaps 1 hour to shoot the video, and then they edited and take snippets from the people who appear in the video, and it becomes a 7-minute video. And we have 7 economists in it from very different variety of sectors. Actually, I can mention the names. Michelle Mayer, head of US economy in Bank of America. So she joined us from US. Dr. Andrew Charlton from Alpha Beta. Myself from University of Adelaide. Professor J. Foster from UNSW. Dr. Bethany Cooper and Dr. Rachel Milted from UNSA, University of South Australia. If I pronounce it badly, forgive me. Julia Lavinia Spezia from ANZ and Eliza Owen from CoreLogic. But the video itself, the project was led by Liz Thompson, who was our WEN National Committee member, and she's a teacher, economics teacher from Sydney Grammar School. And with this video, what did we do there? You can obviously watch it, but we talked about what economics is, how it is relevant for society, and why we like it so much. So it's meant to inspire people and excite younger generation to study economics. So the 3 main issues we try to address with the video is the big misconceptions about economics. As Leonora already mentioned, the big misconception is economics is about money, monetary economics, or money markets mostly. And actually people confuse economics with finance or business. So the variety of topics we study as economists is not visible to the society, obviously to the younger generation as well. So the first misconception is what is economics is about. And the second is what kind of careers, what kind of jobs you can get as an economist. People, especially young people in high schools, they don't know what economics degree can get you, and they don't want to take this risk, especially the female students, so they don't choose to study economics. So we want to show different varieties of jobs also that you can get as an economist. And the third thing is stereotypes about economists, because previously, before WEN and before ABC's 50-50 project, as you know, mostly you see white males as economists in newspapers or TV. So that's what you think an economist is like. So we want to show females mostly as role models, because research shows that role models matter a lot in the choice of university degree and to choose your career. So we wanted to address these issues, and we wanted to give the message that economics is about understanding human behavior and the society we live in, and how it's helpful to address big issues such as climate change, climate change, inequality and poverty. Anything that matters for us as humanity can be analyzed, and economics can contribute to solve the problems we face as society, but also as people, individuals. We use economics way of thinking to, that also helps us as individuals. So we wanted to give that message that economics is useful, it is helpful for the society. Especially the recent research done by the RBA, the high school student survey, showed that female students don't like to choose economics because they find it very risky. They don't know what economics is about, what kind of jobs do you get with this degree. So, and they don't see too many economists around themselves. They don't see the role models. So they don't like to choose this as their degree or job option. But also the students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, they face the same problem. So it's not just a women's issue, but there's a bigger diversity issue in economics. And these are the big issues we want to address. And this video contributed in that aspect to show that, economists can look like us, like women, and from different backgrounds. And we work at a variety of topics. For instance, in the video, I think I have a scene where I'm working on the whiteboard, solving some mathematical problems, because my work doesn't sound like economics to a person if I tell them, because I work on using game theory and mathematics. I kind of design algorithms and allocation methods which focus on fairness. So it's a bit close to computer science. It doesn't sound like very much about economy, money or interest rates or anything like that. So people don't think I'm an economist traditional, but I wanted to show that actually there are different types of topics you can focus on as an economist. So that's the main thing we try to deliver with this video. And it's meant to be used by, shared by the teachers in high schools or even in the first degree university courses where there's a big dropout rate in female students. So we want to show that economics is much more than what you think it is, but also career counselors and also across the world, because it's shared on YouTube. It's not just about Australia, it can be shared everywhere. So that's the big exciting project I was very happy to be part of. That's it from me.
And thank you. And you are a YouTube star now, of course. I'll have to see how many views you've had.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't follow the views too much. Probably Leonora would have the number.
And look, finally, before we go into our panel discussion, we have Mala Raghavan from the University of Tasmania. She's a senior lecturer there, and the WEN Chair of Tasmania from 2017 to 2020. So, and she is going to share with us some of the initiatives around supporting teachers and the challenges attracting more teachers into the future. Mala.
Thank you, Angela. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my experience following the launch of WEN. Now, today I was thinking it's actually in 2017, March 17, WEN was launched in Tasmania. So it's like 5 years, and it's amazing to see how WEN has actually bloomed into something beautiful, and how I've met many amazing friends through WEN. So I would like to share a slide of just to share my, is that visible? Yep, thank you. So now I think Leonora and Duygu has already mentioned few of the things that I wanted to discuss, but I'm going to look at it from another perspective, from the teacher's perspective. They have spoken more from the students' perspectives, from graduates of economics and what we are doing and so on. So I'm going to go back and look at the upstream, the teacher's point of view, what is out there and what kind of support they are getting and so on. So just following on to, Leonora has already spoken some of these points, but just to show some of these statistics, because when WEN was launched in 2017, at that time, a paper from RBA also came out talking about the diversity of students, economic students, how the numbers are coming down. And during when we launched the economics in Tasmania, we actually showed these statistics to the audience as well. And you can see, and when we compare, what was surprising to me at that time, when we compare with STEM, economics was doing so badly. And more so when I showed this last graph, we actually, the growth is negative. At that time, I invited our current Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research, Anthony Kotialis, and because he was an advocate of Athena Swan. So when I showed him, I was telling him it should make you feel better because STEM is doing better than economics. So a lot of the factors that we look at, this diversity, I think Leonora has touched many of it, is because male versus female. You look at the socio-economic status, you're looking at high people from the high economic status compared to low. So these are basically, if you look at it, they are all very demand side factors, students' preference to choose economics. And of course, like what Duygu said, we have to explain to students why economics is interesting. So the focus is always on the demand side factors, which is essential because we need students to be interested to do economics, mainly female students. And at University of Tasmania, we have been conducting economic challenge for the past 20 over years. And as we are acutely aware, even that the student numbers in Tasmania was coming down. So we try to reach out to rural areas from right up to Northwest Tasmania, right up to Hobart. We engage with schools, we charter bus, we bring students to showcase like the issues that Duygu was mentioning, just to highlight what economics is about, show some interesting things like economics from a resource perspective, economics from a fisheries perspective, for example. And then we also reached out to students from a different walks of life, from private schools to public school. But I don't think so in the past, we really focused from a male versus female focus. But since WEN was established, I sort of kind of focusing on that, pay more attention to the number of male versus female students coming through that. And also during that year when we did the economic challenge, every year we have a keynote speaker. And that particular year, we made sure that the female keynote speaker it's the female keynote speaker. So Alex Heath from RBA, she agreed to come down and give a talk to the students, which was amazing. And to just showcase how important role models are, to showcase how women can hold powerful positions and so on. So we wanted to showcase that. But as I mentioned that, some of these, you can read some of these papers that actually discuss issues on this. But what I wanted to look at, because as an economist, we cannot just look at the demand side factors, we also need to look at the supply side of the story. Now, what is the supply side of the story telling us? Is that schools' tendency to offer economics as a choice. Now, again, if you go back, pull that factors, of course, it's between private school versus public schools. I think the private schools tend to have more tendency to provide economics as a lesson, large school versus small schools, and urban versus rural area. So basically, these are the issues from the supply side from the supply side. And when you look at schools' tendency to offer economics as a choice. But what other factors are there we wanted to look at? One of it is the national curriculum itself is pushing economics, okay, to make space for other subjects, especially if you see schools are paying more attention to STEM subjects rather than economics, although economics and institutes, but it's being pushed out. And the other things that we looked at was strategies for building the economics teacher pipeline. We are so focused on the student side, and many schools are actually facing problem where many current teachers in Tasmania particularly are actually at their retiring age. So to replace these teachers, even they themselves are concerned. These are very enthusiastic teachers, but they are already at a retiring age. We need another pipeline of teachers to come in. So the challenges of attracting more teachers in the future is very hard. Even schools, for them, if once these teachers retire, are they going to bring in new economics teachers? If not, what happens? Economics may not be taught in the schools. And then economics is a specialty, and this needs addressing through formal teacher education by the university. So these are the issues that we were looking at, and something I think from a WEN perspective that we need to look at. It's not just encouraging women to study and so on. We also need to provide that support through school system where the pipeline of students coming to the university. So this was my experience, and I pay more attention now following the being part of WEN. So that made me realize that, okay, there's a demand side of the story. There's also a supply side of the story. So I'll stop here, Angela. Yep.
I was going to say, I think I may have gone to one of those open days at the University of Tasmania Economics Department back in, and I'm not going to say when, but it was mid-90s time. On my journey as an economist. Look, thank you, everyone. We're now going to go to our panel discussion. And again, I really encourage people to post questions in the Q&A and we'll look to get to them. And if not, get to them later. I've already replied to a few, and we will provide Leonora's presentation along with the video of today will come out. Now, I want to start with Danielle Wood, who hasn't spoken yet, which seems kind of a bit wrong in some ways, as obviously the inaugural chair of the Women in Economics Network and really the face of WEN for so long, and now obviously the face of the Economic Society of Australia. So Danielle, I just want to go back and look again at when the first WEN committee was established, coming out of that retreat, and what happened and how did it come to fruition? Because it, as much as you know, you were there and it was exciting, it could have gone nowhere. So what happened to create that WEN committee, and can you talk us through it?
Thank you, Angela, and it's lovely to see so many of the original committee members here first and foremost. Look, from my perspective, I mean, the retreat was clearly the genesis, and it was the combination of hearing, meeting so many inspiring women, but actually kind of hearing some of the challenges that women were still facing in the profession that really sort of spurred me and those original committee members, I think, to set things up. There was, I mean, it was a fantastic group, and there was such a sort of sense of energy and passion for the idea. But, you know, as you say, there are, you know, there's a lot of potential stumbling blocks. So there was, you know, there's so many things that may sort of seem obvious in hindsight, but the, you know, crucial decisions you've got to make along the way. So, you know, what would be the objectives of the network, and Leonora set out where we landed. How we would interface with the Economic Society. You know, would we be part of the Economic Society, or would we sit separately? Would we have a federated structure? You know, how do the governance arrangements work? How would we go about promoting ourselves? So there was actually a huge amount of work that went on before we officially launched. It was about 9 months after the kind of that first retreat. In fact, my daughter was only 6 weeks old at the time of the first retreat. So basically she's grown up with WEN, and she's now at school. So it was a really, I mean, I certainly remember, you know, even sort of changing nappies on the table and while chairing some of those initial WEN meetings. And there's, you know, there's not many places you can do that, quite frankly. But, you know, while we were going through all of this, there was still a question mark in my mind about, you know, if we built it, would anyone come? You know, was there going to be an enthusiasm for this type of network? Would we get members? And to me, there was kind of two pivotal moments along that journey. First was a very inspired idea by Leonora to contact Jess Irvine, who wrote a wonderful column in the then Fairfax papers about the network and directed people to the Facebook group we'd established. And that day we got hundreds of members, and everyone was so excited. I thought, oh my goodness, this might actually work. And the second was the launch events that we're sort of commemorating with the 5-year anniversary here. We started in Canberra with a launch event at Parliament House, as someone has said. We kind of filled up one of the big venues there. Every state and territory had one. Hundreds of people came along to each. I think we had about 1,500 across the country attend those launch events. So it was very clear, I think, from that moment that there was a real appetite for this. The final point I would make is, you know, I don't want to give people the impression that, you know, everything is smooth sailing and these things are easy. We had a huge amount of support from the ESA and from the profession in general, but there was also a degree of scepticism. So there were some people where that was, you know, frankly, very healthy scepticism, you know, wanting to make sure that we were going to be in it for the long haul. It wasn't just a flash in the pan. But then there was people who were also pretty hostile to the idea of such a network. I'll never forget one moment dealing with one of them who had been quite difficult the whole way through. And he said to me, I can't even believe you're calling yourself a network. Do you understand the economic definition of a network? Went on to mansplain the definition to me. So there were certainly moments where I was tearing my hair out. But I think the best comeback to those people was always going to be the success. And, you know, I think we've shown that, we've shown the value. It has added a huge amount to the Economic Society, and I appreciate now that from the other side as the ESA president. But, you know, I think it's certainly added a lot to my life, but I think and I hope to all of our members and volunteers through time.
Yep. Thanks, Danny. Yeah, the hostility. So I'm going to open it up now to the floor, if you like, and ask, I guess, looking back, and we are trying to, I guess, in this panel discussion, both look back and then also look forward to what WEN can achieve going forward. Is what the most significant, memorable or valuable impact you think WEN has had? And I'll kick off with you, Deborah.
Thanks. So for me, it's actually just the existence of WEN. You know, this has been tried so many times. And, you know, this really has changed the sort of face of the economic society. And that's not the end all and be all, but it is important that economists have a national body to represent them in, you know, debates around the National Social Science Agenda, for example, what sorts of ARC funding is going to go forward, how the government should think about infrastructure projects. And it's really nice that the composition of the economic society is much more reflective of the composition of the profession.
Yeah. And it's helped lift the ESA membership as well, and the sustainability of the ESA. So I think that's also something to reflect on about the importance of diversity to a healthy organisation. And I'm sure there are a few economic studies that show that, but we have another example with WEN. Tina, for you, what's the initiative that really sticks out? I know you've spoken about the mentorship, but there are obviously other things that WEN's done over the last 5 years. And for you, what's the biggest impact and the biggest change you've seen?
It created a very healthy environment where women connect. This was the network. So the funny thing is that we were in the profession. We didn't have a chance to meet each other. We did know about other women's experience until we were brought together and we had the chance to share them, some of the challenges, some of the advantages, some of the ways we can support each other. The fact that we also had, you know, men colleagues who see, you know, the challenges that we face and they are happy to support us. So it's really about this very healthy environment. And also to see the new generation of the junior that know the existence of the network, feeling way more comfortable about, you know, doing what they're doing. Because before we didn't really have many, you know, role models, or we didn't know, we were not connected to these role models. So I think this is the greatest contribution. And this is particularly dear to me because I moved to Australia without knowing anybody in Australia. And, you know, WEN became part, the retreat happened 1.5 years after I, you know, moved to Australia. And I was the only economist in the first place where I worked. So it was very, very hard for me to know what was going on. So definitely that environment is the biggest contribution in my opinion.
That's really, yeah, it's that support, isn't it? I can remember I sort of went through my undergrad and not realising that I was in a male-dominated profession. I'm not really sure why. I don't know if it was just the lecturers or whatever, but I remember sitting down in my honours year at Melbourne Uni and there were the 5 girls and we were sitting together, and then I looked around and there were 50 men, and I was like, oh, like it just sort of, I always looked at my engineering, you know, my friends who were doing engineering, feeling sorry for them, and then it suddenly dawned on me, I'm in a male-dominated profession. What happened? And I've been very fortunate, I think, like many of us throughout our career, to work with other women and have that relationship, because it is a difficult profession to be a female. The nature of it is, you know, it's very assertive. There can be a lot of aggression involved, and it can be difficult to thrive in that environment. And I think when you do network with other women, it gives you a lot more confidence. And that's certainly been my experience with WEN, is that it's given me the confidence to have a voice and to speak, because I see other women doing it, and it's like, oh, well, I better do it if they're doing it. Otherwise, you know, we have to support each other. And there's that sense, I think, that WEN's really given. For you, obviously the video, but more broadly in terms of WEN and its impact.
So I actually want to say something which is connected to what you and Tina already said about the community, but the other part is up until WEN's formation, I think I was feeling quite inconfident. Like, you know, this, what's that called? What was that word? That imposter you are yeah, imposter syndrome. Exactly. That's what I was feeling. And because thinking back, I was like the first PhD student of my supervisor. I was the only honors student in my undergrad, one of the 4 women in my faculty, in my School of Economics. So but I didn't realize these problems I was facing was a structural problem. Like there is a gender inequity in the profession, and the problems we face are faced by all women. Instead, I personalized those problems and thought something was missing in me, that, you know, I wasn't good enough. And I was like, I think I was scared to talk or voice my opinions because of the harsh criticisms I might be getting. And after WEN, I have taken so many opportunities to put myself forward. I, you know, even presented in public talks, etc., took leadership roles in my faculty. I think all those were possible because of this support I received from being part of this community and seeing that we are doing something with passion and with purpose all together to make this profession more kind for everyone, not just for women, but for everyone. So that's the biggest thing for me. I think all the initiatives we have done has the same general purpose, you know. So I can't say this initiative was better than the other because they're all like your children, you like all of them.
We all have, no, we don't have favourites, I should say that, Douga. Mala, over to you in terms of where you think, or if there's an initiative or an event in particular, or if just your reflections. And Douga, thank you for that. I think it was far more eloquent than the way that I put it. It was very passionate. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, but for me, the first thing is I met many amazing friends through this network. That was really inspiring for me. And like, I just going to echo what Duygu said. Also, the confidence, you know, this network has given me. And the other thing that I was, of course, I was aware of unconscious biasness, but I think once coming into this, I realized how obvious this unconscious biasness that I was not aware. Like you said just now, Angela, sometimes when we sit, we don't even realize we are just one person there. I mean, it's just without us, we kind of accepting, you know, until I think WEN Network brought that the awareness to me, that the unconscious biasness, because I'm more exposed to more open discrimination rather than this unconscious biasness that is sometimes hard to see. The other thing is for me, the mentoring and role model. I realize how important they are. And today I feel it's my responsibility to mentor my students, my junior staff members, because to me, I was fortunate because I had the opportunity to work under strong women. So I saw them as role models, and today I see that that's what now it's my turn to show that. And also, like as Leonora Duygu said, that confidence, sometimes we feel, are we ready yet? And I think the language that we use in the past, when someone calls, I've even heard professors saying, oh, I've been called because they just want me to have this diversity. They want a woman in the forum, or and because I am a female and I am a non-English speaking female, so they've called. I think that language has to change. That's what I realized. We have to own it. When somebody calls me to come and said, Mala, give a talk in a forum, they are calling me because they feel I have the necessary skills and necessary expertise. So I said, be the main cause. Don't be like a flavor, like a pepper and salt on the table. Be the main cause in that. So that's my experience. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you. And Danny, I'll throw back to you for this before we move on to some questions from the audience.
It's hard to follow those fantastic answers.
I know.
Most memorable for me has been the mentoring retreat. So I did organise several of them after that first one that Deborah did, and there was always just an incredible energy, and I met so many fantastic women many of them I've stayed in touch with, and certainly I always get the little kind of buzz when you see them doing something exciting on LinkedIn. I sort of, it feels like it created its own community within the community. The other point I just wanted to follow up on was the one that Leonora and Deborah both made around the media conversation. It has been an absolutely extraordinary shift. I remember there was a piece of analysis done in the early days of WEN that showed that Chris Richardson had more quotes in the media than the top women in the 100 combined. So, it was incredibly skewed to a few voices. And that's been important, not just for the kind of lifting women's profile, but for what gets discussed. And I really genuinely believe we have seen a shift in that. A couple of examples, the conversation around the October 2020 budget is a very blokey budget, which didn't look right at the time, given the way that COVID recession had hit different sectors. It certainly wasn't hitting construction and manufacturing the hardest. That's where the supports were. It was really kind of female journalists and economists that led the charge there. And I would say ditto for putting childcare affordability on the agenda as an important economic issue. And I'll quickly answer the question in the chat in the same vein by Mary Clark around, does WEN advocate for gender equality policy? The answer is no, not as an institution. So WEN's taken the same policy that the Economic Society has, is that we advocate narrowly for the profession, because it's very challenging in a member-based organisation to get agreement on any kind of broader policy statements. But I would say that I think that WEN's role in putting forward more women in the public discussion has advanced some of those policy conversations on gender equality.
I agree with you, Danny. I think, and again, I think that's the collective nature of it as well. It's very difficult to talk on these issues sometimes when it's just you, and particularly when, it's a male audience, but when it's a lot of different female voices out there, and now we have male voices as well saying the same thing, it becomes a lot easier. And I think that's where WEN really has advanced things significantly. It's that sense of support, because for whatever reason, we all do suffer from imposter syndrome, and to be conscious of it and to overcome it, has really been, I think, one thing that WEN's certainly achieved. I want to make sure I don't run out of time to talk about the future. And I know Deborah has some, I think, really important views in this space as well, around advice for women and maybe also men in the economics profession in relation to WEN and the future, and where we can take WEN as a next step.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I just, I feel that there's a leadership vacuum generally, that it's not specific to economics necessarily, or it's not specific to gender issues. But if I think about where we're at with social sciences in Australia, the Academy of Social Sciences in Australia just did this scoping exercise to kind of try to highlight where we're at. And there's a lot around that report, I think, that's pretty concerning. Some of it, Leonora has already talked about, with the trends in students studying various social science topics in schools. But it's also about the nature of the sorts of wicked problems that we're currently facing, and the idea that, are we really going to solve, say, climate change without thinking about economic incentives in various ways. So I would like to encourage WEN members to just think about leadership generally, stepping up, being a sensible voice, taking on either declining school enrollments or, the sort of crazy government policy attached to the way we fund students now in arts and social sciences and humanities. There's just a lot of opportunity for people to step into an important role in leading a reasoned debate around a lot of economic issues.
Well, I think, Deborah, you challenged that first retreat to go away and establish WEN, and they did it. And now we've been challenged to take further leadership. And I think, it's a really important point. And I think, particularly around climate change and, the failure of Australia to introduce a price on carbon, when all of us sitting here around here today would accept that it's the most efficient way for our economy to transition. I think it's great. And I think I will take it up, Deborah. And I hope the other people who are here today will do the same. Tina, what's your advice, I guess, to women looking in the economics profession and navigating these issues and the contribution that they can be making to WEN, but also how we can get maybe more men involved in WEN and supporting the network?
So a few things that we have done in the past. For example, at the Australian Gender Economics Workshop, we generally tend to feature women keynotes because we know most of the econ events actually have, completely failed half of the profession not having enough women as panelists. We have men who have. We had a key professor who has conducted a lot of research in gender throughout the years. So the idea that gender is not just a topic for research for women, but also for men. And also don't forget the fact that, these men are also editors of journals. They are professors in their departments, and they might be future employers. So it is important to have men in the conversation also because of that. We also have both women and men mentors for exactly the same reasons. And something that we had in mind when we kind of invited men to be mentors and they were keen to take up that role was the fact that actually men can learn a bit mentoring women because they might not be aware of certain issues until they are brought up to them. And since we have this very healthy environment where you can have these open conversations, men have also realized and they've become more aware and they're able to speak up or, there's a climate in which men tell you, I've seen that happen to you and I don't think it's right. And I will support you taking this action or that. I've also seen that many students are interested in the cause. And I oftentimes get asked to, talk in career events in my university. And there's a lot of young male students approaching me, telling me that they want to help and contribute. And they always make sure that all the events they organize have, a gender balanced representation of panelists. So the scenery is changing in that sense. We have been able to promote this culture, and we have been able, through the network, to offer, speakers that they wouldn't have been able to connect to otherwise. So we, for instance, we encourage mentees to go and attend this event in our place, because initially, and I think this is probably something that happened to all the initial committee members, we had to cover all these spots. And it's not manageable. It takes a lot of time. And this is a network where we want to make sure everyone gets space. So, we have created that environment where we say, no, I won't be doing it, or I can't do it, but I know someone who is equally able to do it. And we welcome whomever gets in touch with us to contact the next suitable person.
Thanks, Tina. I've just brought Leonora back in because I think there's a question that really probably goes to you as the president of WEN, which is around the inclusion of more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voices. Obviously, WEN by its nature is including more women, but there is always criticism that it tends to be white women that are particularly in the media. And I know there is certainly an effort to ensure that that isn't the case, particularly at WEN events, and that also, and this is another spruiking thing, there is a expression of interest out at the moment for a media workshop with the ABC business team, and we really encourage, if you're listening today, to apply for that, and particularly if you are coming from a non-English speaking background, because having that diversity of views and people on our screens is incredibly important in terms of the role model and also the voices that are in the Australian media, and we have an opportunity really to promote different voices. But Leonora, I will ask this question of you around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women in particular.
Thanks, Angela. And thank you, Sarah, for the question and for raising this. We are very mindful that the principle and a moral guiding factor here, the principle of equality and diversity extends beyond gender. So it extends absolutely to voice and recognition of Australia's Indigenous community and the diversity within the Indigenous community as well. We're also mindful of the regional, the geographic layers of that as well, that there are issues, economic issues, social, environmental, political issues across our country that differ by state and location and region and culture. So if you are involved with initiatives, we would love for you to reach out to us because we can absolutely open opportunities, but the way to do it collectively is to partner with other organisations as well. And Angela's mentioned our partnership with the ABC, supporting more female voices and more diverse female voices within the media. And we've explicitly tried to prioritise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women and voices as part of that initiative. So thank you for raising it.
It might be worth just quickly mentioning as well for Sarah's information that there is some early planning for an Indigenous economics workshop on the way through the Economic Society. So we would be delighted to chat further to you about that and how we can get more people involved in that.
Great. Sounds like a fantastic initiative, Danielle. Look, we're now at 1:59 and I know, and thank you so much to everybody for sticking around for an hour and a half over the lunchtime, and I know going into people's days. We now have to come to the end of this event, which has just been, I think, a fantastic and inspiring celebration of WEN over the last 5 years. It's certainly put a spring in my step in terms of, what comes next. And, there are still obviously immense challenges for us in the profession. This is just the beginning, but I think in coming together, we can see that it's raised people's confidence. It's provided new friends, which is always fantastic, and great mentoring opportunities and career advancement opportunities. And I think it's just strength to strength. Hopefully we get a Deputy Governor of the RBA appointed as the first female in the coming months. There's certainly pressure on board to do that. And this is all part of these conversations, that it's okay for us to demand equity, and it's okay for us to band together, and we can be a much stronger voice doing it like that. So thank you so much for everyone for joining today. Do sign up to the ESA. They have benefited, but it's good that they benefit, because a healthy ESA is a healthy WEN. So please join up and come along to the events over the next few months. Thank you very much.